In 1872, a ship was found drifting in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, completely intact. The table was set for dinner, the cargo was untouched, the lifeboat was still tied to the deck. But every single person on board, all 10 of them, was gone. No struggle, no note, no bodies. Ever. And here's the thing nobody tells you. That ship is not the only one. Today, I'm taking you to 3 boats that were found completely empty in the ocean. And to this day, nobody knows what happened to the crews. Now, before we get into these cases, there's something you need to understand about the ocean. It's the largest graveyard on Earth. And unlike land, when something disappears out there, there's usually no trace, no witnesses, no evidence, just water. But the cases I'm about to show you aren't about ships that sank. Those we can explain. Storms, icebergs, human error. These are different. These are boats that were found floating, perfectly fine, with no one aboard. And the people on them didn't just disappear. They vanished without leaving a single clue.
The Mary Celeste, 1872. Let's start with the most famous one, the Mary Celeste. December 4th, 1872. A British ship called the Dei Gratia spots another vessel drifting off the coast of Portugal. It's the Mary Celeste, a ship that left New York almost a month earlier, carrying 1,700 barrels of industrial alcohol, bound for Italy. The crew of the Dei Gratia hails them. No answer. So they send a boarding party over. And what they find is genuinely creepy. The ship is completely abandoned. The captain's bed is unmade. The crew's belongings are still there. Pipes, clothing, personal items. The last entry in the logbook is dated 9 days earlier. The cargo is all accounted for. There's even food still cooking on the stove. And here's the detail that still haunts investigators to this day. The lifeboat was gone, but it was still attached to the ship by a single frayed rope. So let's think about this. The crew apparently boarded the lifeboat in a panic. They didn't even take time to untie it properly. But why? The ship wasn't sinking. There was no fire, no storm damage. The only thing missing was the crew.
Here's the part that makes no sense. The Mary Celeste's hull was leaking slightly, about 3 feet of water in the hold. It was a problem, but not a dangerous one. A trained crew would just pump it out. They wouldn't abandon a perfectly good ship. Unless something terrified them so badly, they'd rather take their chances in a tiny lifeboat in the middle of the Atlantic. And to this day, over 40 years later, nobody can agree on what that something was. Piracy? There was a broken sword and the alcohol was gone. Wait, no. Actually, the cargo was fully accounted for, so not piracy. A sea monster? A waterspout? Mutiny? Even a theory that the crew got drunk on alcohol fumes and went crazy. All theories. No answers. 10 people boarded that lifeboat and were never seen again.
If you're enjoying this so far, make sure to subscribe. I cover a case like this every week. Now let's move to the second ship, and this one is arguably even stranger. February 1948. In the Strait of Malacca, the waters between Indonesia and Malaysia, 2 American ships pick up a terrifying distress call. All officers, including the captain, are dead, lying in chart room and bridge, possibly whole crew dead. Then, a few seconds later, a final message. I die. And then, silence. When the crew of the Silver Star finally located the source of the call, an old Dutch freighter called the Ourang Medan, they found a scene straight out of a horror movie. The entire crew was dead, not scattered around, but frozen mid-action. The captain was found still clutching his binoculars. The bodies had their eyes wide open, their faces twisted in terror, and their arms were stretched out, as if
they were reaching for something. Now, here's where it gets even more disturbing. Before anyone could figure out what killed them, the Ourang Medan suddenly caught fire. The rescue crew barely made it off the ship. And then, the freighter exploded and sank to the bottom of the ocean, taking every piece of evidence with it. So, we're left with only one thing, that distress call. Scientists have theories, of course. A cargo of hazardous chemicals, possibly nitroglycerin or potassium cyanide, that leaked and poisoned the crew. That would explain the deaths. But it doesn't explain why the bodies looked so terrified. It doesn't explain the captain frozen in place. And it definitely doesn't explain why the ship caught fire and exploded right after. To this day, the Ourang Medan is a mystery that simply doesn't have a definitive answer. In fact, some researchers even question whether the ship existed at all. And finally, let's bring this into the modern era. Because this isn't a story from 150 years ago. This happened in 2007, in the 21st century. And it's somehow just as unexplainable. April 18th, 2007. A catamaran called the Kaz II is found drifting off the coast of Australia, near the Great Barrier Reef. On board is a retired banker named Derek Batten, his brother Peter, and their friend James Tunstead. 3 experienced sailors, all gone. Now here's the detail that breaks my brain. The boat was found with the engine still running, the radio still on, a laptop open, the table set with a meal that was never eaten, and a distress beacon that had never been activated. None of the men were wearing life jackets. The life raft was still aboard, untouched, and the sails were all set perfectly. Think about what that means. These men were experienced. They knew the ocean. If something went wrong, they would have grabbed the life raft. They would have worn life jackets. They would have called for help. But instead, they just vanished. The official search found only one thing. Peter Batten's body, weeks later, floating in the water. No sign of his brother. No sign of James. The official investigation concluded it was a tragic accident, that one of them fell overboard and the other 2 went in to help and drowned. But here's the problem with that theory. An empty boat with its engine running and all 3 men gone isn't a rescue mission. It's a disappearance. And 3 grown men, 2 of them experienced sailors, don't all vanish into the ocean without a fight, without a distress call, without even wearing life jackets. To this day, the case of the Kaz II remains officially open. 2 of the 3 men were never found. So, there you have it. 3 boats, 3 crews, and one terrifying pattern. The ocean took them and never gave them back. The Mary Celeste, abandoned with food still on the stove. The Ourang Medan, a crew dead with terror on their faces, and a ship that sank with the answer. And the Kaz II, a modern boat found sailing itself with nobody aboard. Now, I want to hear from you. Which of these three cases freaks you out the most? Is it the Mary Celeste, the one that makes no logical sense? The Ourang Medan, the one that feels like a ghost story? Or the Kaz II, the one that proves this can still happen today? Drop it in the comments, and if you want, I'll do a deep dive on whichever one wins. If you made it this far, you clearly love unsolved mysteries as much as I do. So hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Every week, we dig into cases like this, cases that still don't have answers. Thanks for watching. Stay curious, and if you ever find yourself on an empty boat in the middle of the ocean, maybe don't go below deck.